Hey everyone, I'm Carrie Lippert-Gillespie, and this is The Homestand, the official podcast of the Kansas City Royals. Each homestand will talk to a special guest connecting you with Kansas City in a fresh new way. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more, and tune in every time your boys in blue come home. I am so excited because we have our inaugural guest here today, Royals broadcaster Ryan Lefebvre.
Wow. That's an honor.
It is an honor.
I will forever be the first.
You will forever be the first. We're excited to have you here today. Before we get into it, I want to shout out a couple of things here. First of all, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that made this all happen, and I want to give them a huge shout out. I am incredibly grateful to our entire creative team who put everything together, got everything set up, our wonderful logo. We have this beautiful desk.
They made this by hand, which is amazing.
Truly,
yeah.
KC Custom Hardwoods. We love this desk. This is incredible. Look at the manufacturing here. Thank you so much to them, KC Custom Hardwoods. We love everything that went into making this possible, to getting you here today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking. It's been fun talking with you in the dugout when we're listening to Mike Matheny and the coaches and the players speak, and now we finally have a formal conversation.
We do.
Yeah.
And, I handpicked you as the first guest. And when I told you that, you laughed at me. And you said, how many other people said no?
Right.
And I said, Ryan, no, I handpicked you.
Okay.
And I handpicked you because, I'm still kind of new. I've only been here a couple months, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people, and it's been great. Everyone's been great. But I've had some really great conversations with you, and you're one of those people, at least in my experience, when you talk to someone, you're listening, you're engaging. You're not one of those people who's talking to people to check things off the box. And when they kind of were like, who are we going to have? I'm like, I think Ryan would be a great first guest. So that's why I handpicked you.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I mean, I really believe that the longer I've done this, it's not more important to have a big call and a big moment, but to also be an ambassador for the team.
Yeah.
And a long time ago, I was like you. I was new here and replacing a very popular broadcaster. And I remember the people who treated me like hopefully I treated you. So that means a lot to me. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, you definitely did. And I actually just recently read your book, which was also really great, and I learned a lot about you there. And you told me too, when I asked you to have you on the show, you're like, Carrie, everyone knows my story. Everyone knows me. They're sick of me. Are you sure? Like, no one. And I'm like, no. Like, I think it'd be great. And your book, I learned a lot about you. And I actually didn't know that you had Major League Baseball in your background. I didn't know about your dad and his history in Major League Baseball and how that kind of paved the way for you. But you also played yourself. Was there pressure, being the child of someone who had so much success on that level?
Yeah, and I think as I look back on it now, it was probably self-imposed.
Sure, of
more.
course.
I mean, I have a very unique last name. My father grew up in Los Angeles and played for the Dodgers. So in the 70s and the 80s when I was a kid, his name was still a prominent name in Los Angeles. So, it was almost impossible for me to introduce myself or be introduced as a kid and someone not say, oh, are you related to Jim?
Yeah.
And so I think there was some pressure because of that. But when I look back at playing in high school and college and very briefly in the minor leagues, I really didn't enjoy the game as much as I could have because I was so afraid to fail.
Yeah.
But as I look back on it now, I don't think that was from other people.
Yeah.
And so I do look back on, and I'm 51 years old now. I'm so far removed from my last real baseball game. But I do wish I could have gone back and just enjoyed the competition and not worry about people judging me because of who my father is.
I don't think you're alone in that, though. I think a lot of athletes I talk to or people who, had a former life doing something else, they would say that same thing, that in the moment, there's so much pressure to do X, Y, Z. And then once they're removed from that, they're able to look at it and be like, dang, I should have slowed down and just enjoyed it. And I might have had better results, whatever those are.
Yeah. And I have 4 kids now, and, they're still young. My oldest is 12, but, they're starting to think about what they want to do.
Yeah.
And having lived through some of that, and now their father is somebody in Kansas City and hoping that I can help guide them at an early age to not only do what you want to do, but find something that you're really going to enjoy. I think I was an only child until I was 13 years old.
Okay.
So I think it probably had as much to do with me just being on a team. I just enjoyed being on a team. I was a good player for most of my life, so I think I enjoyed the responsibility of being one of the better players. But really enjoying and living and dying for every baseball game, I really didn't have that. So I think I made a good decision early on after I started my minor league career to pursue something else.
So, I mean, growing up at a ballpark, that's not something every kid gets. I mean, we see it too. We see little Grenke, Bodie Grenke, who's like the cutest kid. I love Bodie Days, I call him, when he's here with Zach and on the field. And he's even in the clubhouse doing stuff. And that's something that kid will have that like so many other kids won't ever have. And you got to have that with your dad as well. Do you think it diluted like how great it was for you at times?
Well, my parents divorced when I was 5 years old. So that was my one-on-one time with my dad. Yeah. My mom raised me. I knew it was a big deal.
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was just time with my dad. And I started at such a young age. I mean, I remember probably at 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old is when I started hanging out at a major league ballpark, just like Zach's kids.
Yeah.
But I could bat boy back then. So, I mean, I'm 8 or 9 years old. I've got my little uniform and I'm running out and getting bats and getting the foul balls up against the screen and high-fiving guys as after they hit a home run. I mean, I was doing that at a really young age.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, my friends thought it was really cool. So, I would stick my chest out a little farther when I got a chance to hang out with my dad. But I tell you what it did, Carrie, it really prepared me for when I got into broadcasting because I got to the big leagues at a very young age and I was nervous for a million different reasons being 24 years old when I got my first job with the Minnesota Twins, but I was not overwhelmed by the environment.
Sure.
Because I'd spent my childhood around the ballpark in front of big crowds, even though I was just a bat boy. So that part prepared me for my broadcasting job.
So why did you end up going to college in Minnesota? If you were an LA kid, I mean, that's a big difference. I'm a Wisconsin girl. Like, I don't know if I grew up in Southern California, if I'd be itching to go, like, spend the school year in, like, Minnesota or Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there have been many kids would go from Southern California to Minnesota to play baseball.
Yeah.
Maybe to ice fish or something like that, but not to play baseball. There was a few schools on the West Coast, all the way up to the University of Washington, down to Southern California, that recruited me. And really, I went to the University of Minnesota on a recruiting visit as a favor to my father. He was friends with the coach at Minnesota. And I think my coach recruited me as a favor to my father. So we both were just doing a favor to my dad. But the spring of my senior year, the University of Minnesota came out to Southern California for their spring break trip to play USC and UCLA and Irvine and Pepperdine. So they were out there and they thought, well, we may as well go out and watch him play a game. And I guess I played well and they offered me a recruiting visit. And again, I'm thinking, first of all, where is Minnesota? Because if you grow up in Southern California, there's like California and the rest of the world is back east.
And there's Texas and there's New York.
Yeah.
And there's...
so where's Minnesota? And will I ever go to Minnesota again? Well, I'll do the recruiting visit. So as a favor to my father, I went. But there was my mom is from Wisconsin.
Okay.
So I think there was something inside of me that when I went on that recruiting visit, it was just strangely comfortable and it felt at home. And I had some older friends in high school that went away to college. They left California. I mean, some as far as Boston College. And when they would come home for Christmas or the summer, I could tell there was just something different about them than the knuckleheads that went to USC and UCLA and still came back to the high school football games on Friday night. And it's like, what are you doing here, So I think there was also a part of that just getting out of my comfort zone. And I call it the first real mature thing that I did in my life was to just kind of pack up and go somewhere completely different. I knew nobody. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made in my life.
So it's funny you said that you went out there or you kind of took the gig there, went to college there as like a favor to your dad. There was like favors back and forth. Well, when you got this job with the Royals, it's kind of funny. It kind of worked out that same way. You wanted the job with the Twins. You had the job with the Twins. You wanted it extended, correct? But you were like, I'm going to go flirt with the Kansas City Royals, see if I can't get them to give me an offer. So the Twins are like, oh no, we need this guy.
Yeah.
They liked you so much that they lured you over here. And here you still are.
Yeah, it's almost an identical story.
Seriously.
I mean, I truth be told, I interviewed with the Royals for the sole purpose of leverage in Minnesota. I had a bad meeting with my boss at the radio station, and I just was depressed because I'd done all this research. It was going to be my fifth year with the Twins, my fourth year on radio. And I was ready for a big raise. And I look back on it now, and it really wasn't that big of a raise. But for me, it was like a big deal to go to the station, meet with the program director, and say, this is what I think I should be paid. I was worried about it for a month, and I went in there, and he just shot me down. He was so much more experienced in negotiations.
Of course.
So I go back to my apartment, and I'm just depressed, and my old answering machine, for people who remember what those are, and the red light was blinking. I had some messages, and I hit the button, and there's a message on there, and it said, "Hi, Ryan. My name is Sue Rayson, God rest her soul, from the Kansas City Royals radio network, and we were wondering if you might be interested in our radio opening." And I'm thinking, absolutely, I'd be interested in your radio opening. So I made sure everybody knew that I was going to interview with the Kansas City Royals. They fly me here first class, which it's a 1-hour flight. You really can't take advantage of first class on a 1-hour flight. But I thought, wow, first class. I remember like it was yesterday. I sit in my seat, and I get a copy of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. I get to the sports page. I open it up, and on the inside of page 2, it says in headlines, "Lefebvre to interview with Royals today." And I'm like, yes!
My plan is working.
Oh, this is all coming together perfectly. So I land at KCI, and I end up meeting the program director at KMBZ. At that time, I was an employee, or I would have been an employee for the radio station, not for the team. And I get in his car, and we're not even off the KCI grounds. And Bill says, "Well, we're glad you're here, and we really hope this visit goes well today because you're our number one candidate." And I thought that completely changed the visit.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, I thought I was one of like 10 guys or whatever. And we came to the stadium, and just behind you is Craft and Draft. Mm-hmm. It used to be the old Stadium Club, and it was a fancy restaurant, and it was enclosed by big glass windows, and it was open year-round. And they took me to lunch in there, and it was one Royals employee after another coming over and introducing themselves, and we're so happy you're here, and we hope it goes well. I knew some of them because I'd been here with the Twins on a road trip. And I got on the plane that night and flew back to Minneapolis, and I had the same feeling that I did flying from Minneapolis back to Los Angeles from my college recruiting visit. Like, maybe I'm being called to get out of another comfort zone and try something else. Mm-hmm. And they offered me the job, and the Twins said, "What can we do to get you to stay?" And I just thought, I'm not gonna. Here's someone I love, and they gave me a great opportunity as a major league broadcaster. Here's somebody who's interested in me. I'm not gonna have two people bidding for me. That just felt dirty, and I just said, you know what? I really appreciate that you said that to me, but I'm just gonna take this job. And that was 23 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Your original plan worked too well.
Yeah.
Isn't it one of those things?
It backfired right in my face.
You don't always know what you want. Be careful what you ask for because you just might get it.
Right.
Type
exactly.
of thing.
Well, you probably have something like that in your television career, don't you?
Yeah, probably a little bit. Mine was something similar. I've been in media and broadcasting for 10 plus years now. I started at a radio station in my local hometown when I was 17 in college, and they just put me on air right away. It was so small that they we had tens of listeners. That my old boss used to say that tens of people are going to hear this. And I'd be like, thank you. So they put me on air right away, just reading, random, whether it was commercial spots they had. And then I kept, jaw-jacking about the Packers and what they needed to do in the offseason. And he's like, "Do you want to be on the sports side of things?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great." I was on the news side. He's like, "All right, well, you still got to do your internship here, but, you can do sports stuff afterwards with me." We had to go cover some high school football game or whatever it was. And so he let me tag along with them, and I was doing stuff pretty quick there because it was just so small.
Well, we have something in common because I thought I wanted to get into news also.
Really?
Yeah. I think I was afraid of being the dumb jock that could do nothing but either play sports or talk about sports, which in truth, that's probably what I was, But I had a funny story, which you might relate to, but I wanted to be a news anchor.
Okay.
I wanted to be Tom Brokaw,
okay.
Who started in Los Angeles when I was a kid, way back when, before the Today Show and NBC Nightly News and all that. And my mom watches the news all the time. And so I thought, I'm going to be a news anchor. Sit at the stage and good evening. Here's the top stories for tonight, whatever. So I'm doing an internship at a small station like you. And the program director was an aspiring news director. And he eventually became that. He said, well, Ryan, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a news anchor. And he said, really? Well, if you want to be a news anchor, you have to be a reporter first. So on the spot, I was like, well, yeah, I knew that.
You didn't know that, did you?
No, I didn't. So it was like a scene out of a movie. He was looking at me, over his glasses. Yeah. And he leans across the desk and he says, and this is in Minneapolis, he says, okay, 2 kids are walking on the Washington Avenue Bridge and they fall into the Mississippi River and drown. Are you ready to take a camera crew to the kids' parents' house and get a statement from them? And I thought, why would anybody ever want to do that? That sounds terrible. Why would I? So before I left his office, I realized I was not going to be a news anchor because I just didn't have breaking news in my DNA. Yeah. The first one with the scoop. I don't care about that kind of stuff. But similar to you, our stories are similar. I got a little taste of everything, and I felt like just organically life pushed me toward play-by-play. It was just the best fit for my personality.
Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it?
If we allow it to.
Exactly, that's true. You have to be like a willing participant, but it's like the current will take you directions that you're maybe supposed to go. And you have to make decisions, of course. Like you can't just float around aimlessly. You got to get off the couch. You got to do things and whatnot. But if you're purposeful towards things and doing what lights you up, what you're good at, I feel like eventually we get there. It's like this all around. The line to success is not linear, of course. But like you said, if you're amenable to it, you get there. And you're probably going to have some fun stories along the way. Right?
Well, there's a word that I think is not really taken seriously like it should be, and the word is career. And it's really easy to get into something now and think about the next promotion and how quickly can I get to the next job and how quickly can I get a raise. And so when I talk to aspiring broadcasters now who would love to do what I'm doing someday, and I think that's great, is you need to think about this more like 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Are you making progress toward the 20 or 30 year thing? You may not get to where you really want after 10, 15, or 20 years. Yeah. But if you love what you're doing and it's something that gets you out of bed in the morning, that's what I picked coming out of college. I had a lot of college friends who went after the highest paying job that offered them a car, and they bought their first house when they were 24 years old, and meanwhile I'm scrambling to make, $50 a game and $5 an hour just to stay on the air, but I couldn't wait to go to work every day.
Yeah.
And 5-10 years goes by in a flash, and those same guys are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this the rest of my life, and I'm still, jumping out of bed ready to go to my next game.
And ideally, if you're doing it right, it should be building blocks. Every job, every situation, every opportunity that you get should build to your next one, and it should be a building block type of thing. If you're doing it right, not saying that there won't be steps back or anything like that, but I think of that, and I think of Vin Scully, who we just lost recently, and what a career he had. And I know you knew him personally, and you told a story the other day on air about it, but you knew him from when you were a little boy. And he is, highly revered in the industry and left such a mark. And it was, it's so hard to lose someone like that and what he meant to baseball. But building blocks, it's just even his career as well. Do you have any good Vin Scully stories for us?
Oh, he literally changed my life.
Yeah.
When I was little in Southern California, where we lived and where he lived, were 2 different cities, but they were right next to each other.
Yep, that's California for you.
Yep, exactly. So I would see him in public as much
like at the grocery
as
store?
I did at the ballpark. Yeah, we'd run into him at the grocery store. My mom was a real estate agent, and so we spent a lot of time in her car. She'd be going to listings or whatever, and sometimes we'd drive by Vin's house, and he'd be like every other guy's in his yard,
mowing the lawn.
Exactly. And she'd stop and honk her horn, and she'd come over, or he'd walk over, and we would just say hello. And growing up in Southern California, as I said the other day, it was always exciting to meet somebody famous, but I was never really overwhelmed by it, just because you just see famous people at the grocery store and in restaurants, and And then I'm going to the ballpark with my dad around famous ball players. So it was kind of normal for me. But, with Vin, I wanted to be a player. So it was neat knowing the team broadcaster, but I was more interested in the players. Yeah. When I got into broadcasting and I started to listen to him with professional ears and not as a kid wondering what the score was of the Dodgers game, I was just blown away at how good he was. I mean, everything he said sounded like it was scripted and written ahead of time, and he had the right words and the right phrases. I mean, he was just a freak of nature when it came to the language and the timing and the setup and everything. So I get a job with the Twins in 1995. I'm 24 years old. And my mom says, you need to write Vin a letter and tell him what you're doing. He'd probably love to hear that you're doing what he's doing, which I laughed at. And I said, yeah, and I'm going to write a letter to Tiger Woods and say, I play golf too.
I went golfing the other day.
I'm like, Mom, we may have similar jobs, but I am not doing what Vin's doing. It's on a completely different level. And I didn't see him until 2003, and we're finally, interleague play takes us to Dodger Stadium. Mm-hmm. And I was nervous because I had to go in the Dodger booth and say hi to Vin Scully. Now, at this point, I hadn't seen him for 20 years. And I remember I was sitting in I got there really early. I'm sitting in the radio booth getting my work done. And Dodger Stadium's an old stadium, and the hallways are very small at the broadcast level with concrete. So it echoes in the hallway. So I'm sitting in the booth, and it's quiet. And all of a sudden I hear, well, Tom, how was your weekend? It's good to see you. And I'm like, there's only one voice and who that was. And I'm getting nervous, and I'm going to have to go in the booth and say hi to Vin. And I walk in the booth, and, there he is sitting there at the desk in the Dodgers TV booth, preparing like I'm preparing over in the Royals radio booth. And I think, if we get into a business where we have a hero or an idol, and he really became that for me. He was an idol, even though he was a person. Uh-huh. And I think we always dream about, I want to be as popular as Vin Scully, or I want to be as good as Vin Scully, or I want to be as wealthy as Vin Scully, or whatever. At least for me, my goals were very material when I looked at him. And there he was, just sitting there. And I walked up, and I came up to his left, and I was fully prepared to say, hi, Vin, I'm Ryan Lefebvre, I'm Jim's son, I'm a broadcaster for the Royals now, and I just wanted to say hello to you, fully expecting to say, oh, Ryan, good to see you, haven't seen you in a long time, and that'd be the end of it. Carrie, I walk down next to him, and he turns, because he sees someone in his periphery, and he turns, and I'm extending my right hand, and before I can get a word out, he says, well, Ryan, after all these years, look at you. And I just fell to pieces. I was just like, wow, I couldn't believe that, he remembered me. Now, I'm sure that he had, being as popular as he is, he had people tell him, the Royals are coming to town. Ryan Lefebvre's one of their broadcasters. It's Jim's son. And all. If we had passed each other on the street, he wouldn't have recognized me.
You never know.
I don't think so. But I sat down next to him, and I started telling him stories about the Royals that I knew he could add some color to it the way he always could. And he's sharing stuff with me. And for 10 minutes, we were just two broadcasters sharing information on each other's teams. And the way that it changed my life was when the series was over, I wrote him a letter. I went back to the team hotel, and I wrote him a long letter just telling him, how much that meant to me and what he's meant to me. And we ended up doing a radio interview together, which they played the other day during the rain delay in Chicago. But I left realizing, you know what? I'm never going to be as big as Vin Scully. I'll never be as good as Vin Scully. I'll never be as revered as Vin Scully. But I can do for someone else what he did for me that day. That I can do. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that. And so when people come up to the booth, or if I run into them at the stadium or in public, and I see myself as just a regular guy. I'm married with 4 kids. I'm more concerned about, are things going well at home, whether is my call going to be replayed on SportsCenter tonight or not. That's just kind of life as a husband and a father of 4. But I know that some people listen to our games every day. And if I run into them, to them, it's a big deal to meet me. And I don't want to ruin that for them, just like he didn't ruin that for me. And so that really, really changed the trajectory of what I thought, what I realized my purpose was, as not as a Royals broadcaster, but more of a Royals ambassador.
Yeah, it's so much bigger than that, like you said. And I think Vin really encapsulated that in everything that he did. It's so much more than just calling balls and strikes, calling the game. You have a way to reach people. And there's so many people, too, who feel like they know you because they listen to you every day. So whether or not they've met you, and I feel this way too with the Good Morning America and the those crew, and Robin Roberts. She's the one that I always looked up to growing up to. I'm like, I know Robin's my girl. Like, we are friends. I've never met her, but she's in my living room every morning. Like, I know her. There are so many people who know you because of what you provide for them, and that's a special place to be. And it's someplace that it sounds like you don't take that lightly, which is great.
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, I think as I'm younger, like a lot of people, it's kind of like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I'd love to do a World Series sometime, or I wish I could have an iconic call that they play on Crown Vision before every game, or me. And then you get to a point where you think, gosh, you can either take the route of, I've been here this long, I've done this, I mean this much to the team. And then I think as we get older, you're like, wow, the team has trusted me.
Done so much for me.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, everything I have in Kansas City is because of the Royals, And so, and then to really think about the role that they trust me with every night, the information that they give me, some stuff I can share on the air, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I can kind of carefully filter the message through so that the fans know what's going on with the team. And then you begin to realize, gosh, wow, why me? why have I had this job for so long? So then it really just becomes very humbling.
Yes, 100%. Now, strategically, I would love to know how you strike the balance of, talking enough, but not talking too much. Because with your job, it's hard. You get the people who don't talk enough, and people are sitting at home like, there's no sound here. What's going on? We need people to talk more. And then you get people who talk too much, and then the people at home are like, well, this guy just wants to hear himself talk. And so it's this beautiful place to get into to get to that sweet spot, but it's probably tricky, is it not?
Yeah, I think somebody asked me recently, what do you wish you could go back 20 whatever years and say, hey, Ryan, you really need to work on this, because do you want to learn this now, or do you want to learn this over the course of 20 years or whatever? It was a good question. I had to think about it. And I think the answer that I came up with is, in baseball, which is 3 hours every day for 6 months, I have to learn, and every broadcaster has to learn, to be comfortable with their own silence.
Yes.
And that I've never heard of someone say, not never, I can hardly remember anyone saying, this guy doesn't talk enough. Yeah. It's always, this guy won't shut up. Because there's this tendency to feel like we always have to be talking.
Filling the space, filling the void.
Yeah. So sometimes I might have a good story to tell, and sometimes there might be nothing to say, and so say nothing. Denny told me our first year together, I asked him for advice about broadcasting together on the radio, and he said, well, I'll tell you what Buddy Blattner told me back in 1969. If you have something good to say, by all means say it. If you have nothing good to say, then say nothing. And that seems it seems simple, but there's always a tendency to feel like I have to say something. And so I look at it this way. Let's say you and I go to a Royals game, okay? You're new to town. We're friends, but you're new to town. You haven't really been following the Royals, but you're really excited to come to the game. I've been following the Royals just about every day. So you're going to sit down, and in the early innings, I'm going to tell you, the Royals have been playing well this year. The team they're playing is not. This pitcher's not been doing well this season, but he seems to be getting a little bit better. The offense he's facing today has had a really good year, so this will be a good test, and to see, just kind of setting the stage for what's going on. And as the game goes along, hopefully that tapers off and that we just begin to sit together and watch the game. And then maybe there's a comment here or there about, hey, did you know that this guy's grandfather played in the major leagues, or add an anecdote to what's going on. But as the game develops and as the tension builds in the later innings, we hope, then we're just sitting and watching. And so I kind of take that approach in a broadcast. Early on, I don't ever want to assume that the audience is Royals fans that have been watching every game every season.
Well, because no one's watched as detailed as you have watched. So you kind of have to like pick and choose. You know what I mean?
I'm introducing the game and the teams.
Exactly.
The early innings. And when I'm doing the game on television, Rex Hudler is going to be adding color to the statements, and television is more geared toward the analyst. So he should be talking more than I should on television. On radio, the innings that I do on radio, typically I'm just the only one that's talking, And then as the tension builds and the moments become bigger, I should be just sitting back and watching the game with everybody else. Let the crowd noise tell the story. Let the sounds of the game tell the story. And I'm just complimenting what you see on your screen, but I don't want to be talking over it. I mean, one of the great things that we've all learned from Vin Scully, and I learned this at a young age in my broadcasting, is when the moment is big and the crowd is roaring, don't talk over that. I mean, there's nothing better on radio or TV to just listen to the crowd, and on TV cutting to fans that are celebrating. I mean, what am I going to, hey, look at that guy. He's really excited. Just let the picture and the sounds tell the story, because that's bigger and better than anything I could ever say.
Yeah. And it's finding your place and finding your style too. Everyone's got their own style of what they like to bring to things. And the way you broadcast is different than the way the next person broadcasts. And finding that niche and that spot for yourself, I'm sure, comes with time, it comes with age, comes with feeling it out, making mistakes, screwing up, and figuring it out.
So Robin Roberts was your Vin Scully?
Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself on the air saying, wow, I was just copying her. That wasn't me. That was me copying her.
I loved her career trajectory, because she started off as a sports gal at ESPN, and then she went to the more lifestyle, Good Morning America stuff. But she can do it all. I mean, she does. She has such a wide, variety of things that she can do, things that she has done. So I just think she's a great full spectrum journalist, and that's kind of always what I aspired to be. There's people who specialize in one thing. David Muir is always going to be World News Tonight. He's going to have that stern look that everyone loves to hear from David Muir or Barbara Walters or whatnot. And I'm like, I kind of want to do it all. I kind of want to have a little fun. And that was Robin Roberts, I think, for me.
Yeah. Well, we all need that. I mean, I think we all need someone that we watch and say, I like the way he or she does it, so I'll start from there.
Yeah.
And then over time, it's kind of like, what's that, that visual that people use, ships at sea, where they're going alongside, but if one of them turns 1 degree, you can't tell right now, but 200 miles into the ocean, all of a sudden, they've gone a long way from each other. And I think that's similar to what I did. Is I'll start by hopefully being an accurate broadcaster and a good storyteller like Vin Scully is, but eventually it has to be
Ryan
Lefebvre, not a second-rate version of Vin Scully.
Yeah. The question I've really been wanting to ask you is, where do you come off putting a B in your name? That's the real question here.
I mean, so it's a very common French name. Lefebvre is how it's pronounced. That's the correct pronunciation.
Can I call you that from now on?
I'm not gonna. I won't know who you're talking to, but yeah.
He's gonna start ignoring me in the dugout. He's gonna be like, this girl.
Yeah, and so for French-speaking people, I mean, it's like, my last name. It's like Smith.
Yeah.
It's common. So we go to Montreal in 2002. French-speaking Canada. We're in Quebec. I mean, Montreal. I don't know if you've ever been there before, but I mean, it is the most bilingual city, I think, in all of North America. I mean, everybody speaks English and everybody speaks French. So in 2002, that was right about the time that I think caller ID would come up when you would call the front desk, right? So here we are in Montreal, and I don't know, I think I had ran out of towels or something like that, and so I hit the operator, and so I'm sure my name comes up, and the guy's like, "Bonjour, Monsieur Lefebvre," and he starts, going into all this French, and I'm like, can I have a couple of towels, please? And I could, on the other end, he's probably like, oh my gosh.
This guy.
beautiful French name is wasted on this ugly, American, or whatever. And so yeah, it is the B. My name has been mispronounced and misspelled more times than I can count. But somehow somebody came up with Lefebvre out of the name, which sounds like a stage name, right? They're like, well, what's your real name?
Yeah.
Because it can't be Lefebvre, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So true. That was the one question I needed to get out from you. Where do you come off putting a B in your name?
Right.
Well, we have some lightning round questions that I'm excited to ask you.
Okay.
These are fun. This is how we're going to wrap it up. We know you have stuff to do before the game, so we want to be, courteous of your time. But these are some hard-hitting questions. Are you ready?
Oh, boy. Let's go.
What is your go-to ballpark snack? Do you eat at the ballpark? Because some people, being on radio and stuff, you got to make sure the vocal cords, do you have a specific thing you drink or what is it?
Well, I do have dinner right before the game.
Yep, I see you in there.
I stay away from sugars and carbs because it'll make my voice phlegmy.
Sure.
If that's a word.
Yes,
it is now.
It is.
So, but I'm mostly just drinking water. I'll have a cup of coffee
Sure.
before the game just to give myself a little boost of caffeine. But I really don't eat anything during the game, just because I don't want to have something stuck in my throat.
You don't want any chewing ASMR in the background?
No, I don't. Right. The whole game. So we do have on television and radio, we have a little box in front of us that has a button that says cough on it, literally. So if we have to clear our throat during the game, we can hit that and it turns the microphone off and we can be clearing our throat. But usually it's just water during the game.
Keep it simple.
Yep.
All right. You get to pick a walk-up song. What is it?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is kind of embarrassing, but my last walk-up song at the University of Minnesota was a New Kids on the Block song.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have this, some people in Kansas City know, not everybody, but I have this fascination with boy bands.
Oh, wow.
So it's a New Kids on the Block song called Call It What You Want, but it was remixed by the CNC Music Factory in the early 90s. And
Great
that was
time.
my walk-up song at the University of Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a strong song too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah. It takes a real man to admit that too.
They love boy bands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But that's okay.
You heard it here first, but we're breaking news right here on the
Right.
podcast. Hardest name you've ever had to pronounce?
Oh my gosh.
What about like Saltalamacchia or that's a tough one, but...
I don't know, but the first thing that comes to mind is, so my first year with the Twins, I did basically what Joel Goldberg does for us, and I got to do some work in the booth.
Okay.
My second year is when I started doing more play-by-play on television and then on radio, which was really my goal at that time, is I wanted to be a radio play-by-play announcer. So my first game was at Jacobs Field in Cleveland, which is now Progressive Field, 1996. And the Twins are playing the Indians. And it was my first game on the Twins radio network. And in my first inning, which was the fourth inning, John Gordon, who was my mentor in Minnesota, says, we go to the fourth inning, and here's Ryan Lefebvre. And Chuck Knobloch was leading off for the Twins in that inning. And so here I am, I'm doing my first, I had already done a couple of games on TV, but I don't know, but there was something about doing my first inning on radio. Mm-hmm. And I just fell all over Chuck Knobloch's name. He's a Twins player. It's for our team. It's not even that hard of a name to hear. And I know all of my friends and all of my former teammates are listening to my first inning on radio. And I was like, Chuck Knobloch. And it was just like, oh my gosh. Couldn't even get that name to roll off my tongue. So I can't think of one that I really
that's a
struggle
tough one.
with, but it's not a tough one.
But
I found a way to butcher it in my first inning.
You know whose name is low-key hard to pronounce is Joel Goldberg, because phonetically his name ends with the letter, this sound that it starts with.
Yeah.
So I was interviewing him when we were in Cooperstown, and I just didn't even say his name. And I know Joel I know his name, but for some reason I could not say it in unison when we were on camera. And he's we got done, and he's like, yeah, everyone has a hard time with my name. And I'm like, that's because it's phonetically a mess, all right?
Well, and along those lines, too, it's not a name, but when the Royals play the Orioles, Royals and Orioles, it's and I will say sometimes, at the end of 3 innings, it's the Royals 4 and the Orioles 3. And I'm like, did I say Orioles 4, Royals 3? Because they sound a lot alike.
Yes.
And so that always messes me up.
It's tricky. Let's hear your favorite game you've ever called.
Oh, boy. Well, the first one's obviously like, what am I doing here? I'm broadcasting Major League Baseball at 24, 25 years old. I mean, the wild card game in 2014 right here was just such a...
Electric.
Yeah, and it was just such an incredible game, and the way that it ended, Game 5 of the 15 World Series and getting to be able to say the Royals are World Series champions was amazing. But I don't know if I think about it in games, but I'll say this, the inning that I'll never forget. It was Game 4 in Houston in the division series, and it was an elimination game. We had gone to the World Series and made it to Game 7 the year before. Then we won 95 games in 2015, and it was almost over in 4 games. We were down by 4 in the 8th inning, just like we were in the wild card game. Down by 4 in the 8th inning in Houston, and I think everybody felt like the season was over. But it was an afternoon game, and I was doing the game on radio, and it was that rare time today with so much television that I knew that there were a lot of people in their cars, in car line or whatever. It probably wasn't late enough for them to get home and turn the game on radio. So I knew we had a huge radio audience, and then just the incredible comeback. I mean, the Royals scored 5 runs in the 8th inning and took the lead, and there was an error, and so I always think that was like the ideal
game to call
inning on radio. But what I remember about is we were down by 4 in the 8th inning, and I quoted Fred White, my predecessor here, and Fred White used to say, if you want to dream a little bit, and then he would present this scenario that just kind of seemed, like very unlikely.
Yeah.
And I said on the air, the Royals are down by 4, and this just happens as a broadcaster. Sometimes we plan things and it doesn't sound that great. It sounds like it was planned, and then sometimes, almost just like a gift from God, the words just fall from the sky and they're right there. And I said, well, something along the lines of, we go to the 8th inning. The Royals are down by 4, just like they were in the wild card. And as the late Fred White once said, if you want to dream a little bit, well, we've seen this happen before, and we'll see if it happens again here. And I just imagine people in their cars just going,
yeah,
really? I mean, how corny was that? Well, when they came back and won the game, now all of a sudden everyone called me, how did you know?
Yep.
I didn't know. I just was, I thought the season was about to be over. So.
Yeah, that's a cool memory. This one, I'm curious about your response. Would you rather call a 1-0 game, or, a goose egg game, or a really high-scoring game? 20, the Red Sox a couple weeks ago had a game where that was just runs on runs on runs, 20-some runs. Would you rather call a game like that, or a game where it's goose eggs?
I think the high-scoring game like that is fun every now and then.
Yeah.
But the 1-0 game is, I don't know if the fans enjoy a game like that, but as a broadcaster, every pitch means something, every play means something.
So true.
Those are more interesting to me, as opposed to, it's 10-9 in the 5th inning, and everybody knows, like, okay, we just hit a 2-run home run, but this game is not over. But so I'd prefer, as a broadcaster, I'm not saying the fans should enjoy that more, but as a broadcaster, the 1-0 game.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for being
thank
our
you.
guest. Anything else you would like to promote? This is your minute to shine. Anything you want to tell our listeners about, or anything like that?
Well, I want to actually have a question for you before
Let's
we
hear
go. Okay, so you've been in Kansas City for 2 years now, right? So how do you like Kansas City? How's Kansas City treating you?
I love Kansas City. And Kansas City's been great. You're right. I've been here 2 years. And, it reminds me a lot of home. I'm from Wisconsin. It reminds me a lot of Milwaukee. I went to school in Milwaukee, so I spent 4 years there. And I really love Milwaukee. We thought about moving there.
Where did you grow up in Wisconsin?
Central Wisconsin.
Central Wisconsin, okay.
Small town Central Wisconsin. And, we were living at my parents' place in, small town Central Wisconsin in the middle of pandemic. And October hit, and we were like, we got to get out of here. We were just, everyone had that moment in the pandemic. And we picked Kansas City. We thought about Milwaukee. I still have a lot of connections there in the baseball field and in the TV field because I worked there. And then we thought about Kansas City. My sister-in-law lives here. My husband is from Omaha. So we were like, let's just do it. We came here for a wedding one weekend, and we looked at apartments, and like 2 weeks later, we moved down here, and we've been here ever since. And it's been great. Honestly, my husband, I don't want to say he brought me here kicking and screaming. He didn't, I would have preferred to have gone to Milwaukee. But now that we've been here 2 years, it's kind of flip-flopped. Could kind of take or leave Kansas City. And I'm like, no, we're buying a house. We're looking for a house. I'm like, this is where I live. This is what I like. I'm Kansas City. So.
Have you claimed a barbecue restaurant yet?
I'm a vegetarian, Ryan.
It doesn't matter. Even if you go there and just have the French fries or the onion rings.
Well,
next time we talk, you're not truly a Kansas Citian until you claim your barbecue.
So when
location.
my family was in town, we went to Q39 and they had a wonderful, vegetarian burger for me. And I love like onion rings. I like all the barbecue accoutrement. You know what I mean? So like the mac and cheese.
Who's going to look up accoutrement in the dictionary?
Yeah, there we go. Is that too big?
I mean, I can say it, but I don't know what it means. But
you and your French last name and you don't know the word accoutrement. Come on, Ryan. So we went there and I loved it. So maybe Q39. I don't know.
Okay,
I like
it's a good place to start.
Barbecue adjacent stuff. Kansas City people are good. Like they like good food. They like good beer. They like their sports teams. Like that's what I grew up around. That's what I like. So it's been a really seamless transition.
Yeah,
and I've loved every minute.
Well, welcome, and we're happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm so happy that you were here today. Again, is there anywhere you want to tell the people to be found? Do you want to be found on social media, or are you not?
I'm not on social media.
Wow, a unicorn, everyone.
Well, this sounds like, false humility or modesty or whatever, but I feel like 3 hours a night is enough of me. You don't need to be following me on social media. I'm really not that interesting beyond the 3 hours of the game. I do have an account. I follow only 5 people or places, and it's all Royals related for news, but I have no social media, none.
All right. So sorry, you guys. If you want more Ryan, there's no more to be found.
Tune into Royals baseball. Yeah.
Listen for him there for 3 hours and you'll be sick of him. Just kidding. We love you, Ryan. True. We love having you here. You're such an integral part of the Royals as an organization. You have been so welcoming to me. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for being our first guest.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Carrie.
This is great. We're so happy you could be here. We're so happy that everyone tuned in and listened. There's going to be more episodes, so make sure that you subscribe. Again, the show is called The Homestand, so we're doing another episode each homestand. There's, we're making it easy for people to remember when to tune in.
Are you going to wear that shirt for every podcast?
Yeah, I'm just going to leave it hung up in our studio.
Perfect.
I'm going to take it home, no washing, and it's just going to be the shirt every time.
Perfect.
So there we go.
And it'll sell like crazy at the Royals team store. I want the shirt that Carrie wears on the podcast.
Either that or they'll be like, no, we're sick of this. Get it off of her. Have her wear something else. So thank you so much, Ryan, for being here. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Homestand.